Hi, everybody. We'd like to thank you so much for tuning in today to our inaugural episode of 3P Champions. The 3Ps are passion, purpose, and principle. I'm Rob Stoller, here with my friend
I'm Greg Stern.
Greg Stern. Greg's in Seattle. I'm in Philadelphia, and we met in the middle. Actually, Greg, why don't you tell the people how we did meet?
Yeah, hey Rob, I think it was about 2011 or 2012. I had some projects up here in Seattle. One had to do with film. I had no background in that, so I figured, let me find somebody. I looked up on LinkedIn and I saw your profile, and I think I sent you a message. I don't know if it was a week later. I was downtown Seattle. You responded with a phone call. I picked you up, and I expected to speak with you for a few minutes, but I think we spoke for an hour and a half or 2 hours because it was we just hit it off.
Yeah, I think it's the first valuable relationship I ever got out of LinkedIn, but made the whole thing worthwhile for me. So we spoke a lot without ever having met. And then you told me you were going to Vegas.
Yes, indeed. I was at this time. I've been kind of inspired by different people. I guess I was a little lucky. I had a guy I worked with who actually played basketball for the great Coach Dale Brown from LSU, and I had done some legwork and contacted Dale Brown, and he invited me to Las Vegas for an introduction. And at that same time, that's when I met you, Rob, face to face.
Yeah, man. I said, "What are you going to Vegas for?" And you said, "I'm going for a meeting with Dale Brown." I was like, "What? The Dale Brown from LSU?" And you're like, "Yeah." I said, "I love that guy. And I'm going to come out and meet you." So we rendezvoused in Vegas, grabbed a dinner, spent a couple of hours. I think we both realized that the guy sitting in front of us was the same guy that was on the phone. I didn't meet Dale Brown that day. When you went to meet him, I headed back to Philly. But you told me about that meeting and suggested that the three of us have a phone conversation because Coach Brown wouldn't do Zoom.
That's right. And
Yeah.
just so the people know, that was 2012 when we rendezvoused in Vegas and met, and I met Dale Brown. It was actually 9 or 10 years later when we actually had our new encounter with Coach Dale Brown that started this whole thing. It
Which
was
is
almost a
crazy.
decade in between.
Yeah. So today we're going to air that phone call, and I'm going to beg the audience's indulgence because the audio is not typical of what we will be presenting in our 3P Champions series. But the phone call was so extraordinary in my life just to listen to this man who's got such a servant mentality. And I don't want to give much away, but he's done so much for so many people. And it seemed to me after the phone call that basketball was the least of it. Even though he's a Hall of Fame coach, he's traveled to 90 countries, spent time with Mother Teresa. And the only thing I will tell the audience is that he became this extraordinary humanitarian, despite the fact that his father left home 2 days before he was born, and Dale Brown never met his father. And instead of becoming bitter and resentful his whole life, which would have been understandable, he went quite the opposite direction. And you'll hear today how his mother inspired him and about his other influences. And when we got done with that phone call, I know I was off the rails with excitement about having spoken to somebody unlike anyone I'd ever spoken to before. And that's when I think Greg and I started to put together this idea of finding people of passion, purpose, and principle and presenting them to the world, which is what we're doing today.
Absolutely, Rob. I want to say one thing about Dale Brown. I think everybody loves to be inspired. I love to be inspired. I think we both like to be inspired. And that's one thing with Dale Brown. You listen to him, you're going to be inspired because his story is amazing. He's passionate, and he's in his late 80s. That's what's so fascinating. Just an amazing human being. So if you like to be inspired, you definitely got to listen to Coach Dale Brown.
Yeah, I think you'll understand why we got excited and inspired. And we've gone on to really interview an extraordinary collection of individuals. And as I said, please forgive the audio. It's less than perfect for sure. You'll be required to listen a little more closely than you might ordinarily, but I think that's a good skill to practice anyway. We welcome you to join us today and in the weeks to come. So without further ado, here's our conversation with Coach Dale Brown.
How you doing, Rob? Hi, Coach. It's really a pleasure to be on the phone with you. Well, thank you, sir. I hope I can help you somewhat. Well, you've helped everybody else, so... oh, you're too kind.
Hey, Coach, so I just want to kind of preface it by this. Our whole mission on this is just to basically spread the good to the world, right? And so our focus and mission is to talk to people like you that represent passion, purpose, and principle. And obviously you exemplify that more than anybody I know. So what we're doing is trying to get these stories and just talk from you about your life and kind of how you impact the world and those types of things.
You
And then,
just go ahead and ask anything you want, and I'll reply.
okay, I'm going to pass you over to Rob. He's going to ask you a few questions, and I'll jump in whenever.
Okay?
Thanks, Coach. Okay, Rob.
You know, Greg and I met almost 10 years ago, and we rendezvoused in Vegas after having talked for hours about human behavior and how we think life can be lived and the way people can help each other. And he was there at that time to meet with you. Oh, I'll be darned. What year was that, Rob?
I think, Coach, you were doing a speech down there. I met you in the room with your buddy, but I think it was like 2012. You bought me some ice cream.
for no real particular reason at that time, other than I was always a basketball fan and I played. I wasn't at the level Greg got to, and certainly in your experience, but I played for decades and I watched a lot of it. And of all the college coaches, for whatever reason, I can't even say why, but I just always thought you were a great coach, and it felt like anybody who played for you was lucky to play for you. And after having watched the film about you, I just realized that you're so much more than a basketball coach. And that's not to diminish coaching, because Greg and I have also talked at length about the value talented and empathetic and skilled coach, because there are a lot of them that aren't necessarily there either for the right reason, but they care about winning than the welfare of their kids or whatever it might be. You do exemplify, I think, the finest qualities a coach can. I think there's nobody that you could possibly be on the phone with more appropriate than yourself. So, Rob, you're so very kind, and every time I'm fortunate enough to have somebody say something nice, I think of my mentor of 40 years, John Wooden. Never in my life, now there's 8 billion people in the world, I've never met a human being that represents goodness as much as him, and with no ego. Just give you just an example, that wonderful compliment you gave me. It's I can't express it, so I have to tell you the way he expressed things. We were sitting in a restaurant in Baton Rouge. I brought him down for my summer basketball camp to talk to the coaches and the team, and we were sitting having lunch one day, and I saw a young man standing off on the side, maybe 40 years old, looking over at the table. And just as we got our lunch, he came over and he said, "Excuse me, Coach Wooden." He said, "I know this is rude to me." He said, "I don't want an autograph. I don't want to shake your hand. I don't want to take a picture. I just want to tell you this." He said, "You're my hero. You're a legend of all time, and you're one of God's angels." He said, "God bless you, Coach Wooden." And he turned to walk away. Coach Wooden put down his ribs. Young man. He waved him back. "What's your name, young man?" He told him. And we'll say it was Rob. And he said, "Rob, that was really, really kind of you." He said, "You just made an old man feel real good." But he said, "I wouldn't want you to leave here under false pretenses about who I really am. I'm still a work in progress." He said, "I'm not what I ought to be. I'm not what I could be. I'm not what I should be. However," he said, "you stimulated me to make me a better man." And I thought, how in the world? Well, it kind of reminds me a little bit of my mother. The two mentors I had, my mother was abandoned by her husband, my biological father, 2 days before I was born. Never returned, never called, just vanished, just left her. This is 1935, at the beginning of the middle of the Depression, practically all hit at once. She came off a farm, had 8th grade education, and demeaning as heck for her. She had to become a maid and babysit for the children of these people. We lived in a one-room apartment above a bar and a hardware store. But that woman never, ever complained in her life. And what John Wooden does, there's an old Edgar Guest is John Wooden's favorite poet. And my mother is Edgar Guest, and we should all follow this. He said, "I'd rather see a lesson than to hear one any day. I'd rather you walk with me than to merely show the way. The eye's a better teacher and more willing than the ear. The counsel you are giving may be very fine and true, but I'd rather get my examples by watching what you do. And as a result, I can remember two specific incidents that my mother taught me how to live. One night, she came home from babysitting, and I waited up for her for a long time. Little 10-year-old boy, and one-room apartment, no bed. I never slept in a bed for 21 years. She had a little bed that pulled up from the wall, and I could touch her head. I had a little sofa right next to her. She asked me to sit in her chair. So she pulled up the footstool and she said, "Son," she said, I'm really embarrassed to tell you this. I just don't want you to make the same mistake I made." And I'm thinking, my mother never smoked, she never drank, she never swore, she never talked about another person, she never dated anybody. What's my mama talking about? She said, "When these big shots come to pick me up, I'm so self-conscious that they may ask me, well, where'd you go to college? I don't want to say it was the 8th grade. What'd your husband do? I don't want to say he left me." Or they'll smell the mothballs under my clothes because we buy them at the rummage sale. So she said, "Son, I don't want you to make this mistake. What I do," she said, "I look up big words in the dictionary and I write them on a 3x5 card and try to remember them. And so when I get in the car, I try to control the conversation with them." She said, "Dale, don't ever do that in your life." She said, "I'm trying to make an image on those people." She said, "Son, don't do that, because if you spend too much time polishing you'll eventually tarnish your character and be an unhappy man." Second story on my mother. She used to go shopping for groceries, middle of winter. I'd see her put on her winter coat, and she'd come back with brown paper sacks, and she was always conscious they gave her the right thing. Bread, milk, cheese, potatoes, very seldom meat, and she'd always cross them off the list. 2 times, Greg and Rob, I saw her go get her winter coat. I'll be right back. "Where you going, Mama?" She came over. Oh, she had a quarter in her hand one time. Oh, the lady at the red oil gave me a quarter too much for change. So we need to learn from having mentors that can teach us to do things right. Pete Maravich is another story I'd like to share with you. I inherited the job. His father got fired. He was the coach here, and Pete was suspended from school after his playing career ended for some disciplinary reasons. So I wrote both Pete and Chris Maravich, his father, a letter and told them, "I'm very sorry I had to inherit this job under these conditions. And I understand there's friction, and I wasn't a part of it, but the door's always open. I wish you'd come back to the family." And that was it. Well, they never answered. I understood that. We were on a road trip that I played at the University of Oklahoma, in neutral site on the road, national television. And I was waiting. We had a little lunch. We were going to take the guys to a movie the day before the game. I was waiting for the check, and all of a sudden I get a tap on the shoulder. I turn around. Here's Pistol Pete Maravich. I'd never met him, never seen him, never talked to him. "Coach Brown," he said, "how are you?" "Hey, Pete." I got up and, "What are you doing here?" He said, "I'm doing cover for the game tomorrow." I looked at my watch and I said, "I've got a meeting upstairs with the team, and I'm a stickler on being on time." I said, "Pistol, would you come upstairs and let's bury the hatchet? Just talk to the team for me." "Absolutely." So we go upstairs, and I had a very good team at that time, a couple lottery picks on the team. I said, "He needs no introduction. The greatest offensive player in the history of the game, Pistol Pete Maravich." He gets up, and this is his speech. He said, "I see a couple of you guys in the front row, probably going to be lottery picks here. Don't ever attempt to break my record. I average 44.2 points a game at LSU. Nobody will ever break that." He said, "I went into the NBA. I was the highest paid professional athlete in history. I led the NBA in scoring." He said, "I had everything the world calls success. Man, I drove the flashiest cars. I always walked around with $3,000 to $4,000 in my pocket. I was a gambler." He said, "I drank too much. I took drugs. I chased women." He said, "Everything the world calls success I had." And he said, "You know what I was? I was a frustrated, disillusioned, and bewildered human being." He said, "One night in my home in Louisiana, I walked around. I tried to communicate with extraterrestrial people." He said, "I made a decision. I was going to commit suicide." He said, "I went into a spare bedroom, opened up a drawer, pulled out a pistol, put it up at the roof of my mouth." He said, "I had my finger on the trigger to end the misery I was in." He said, "Why and how, I don't know, but I fell on the bed prone." He said, I didn't even know how entire body. He said, for the first time in my life, he said, I was a miserable SOB until I took Jesus Christ into my life. Do not let your possessions possess you. And he walked out of the room. Well, we became friends. Very, very nice man. He shared with me one time before a ball game. We're sitting in the dressing room. He said, Coach, how do you suppose we lose our values? He said, well, I didn't have any values. He said, I was always told, you do this, you'll be a millionaire. Do this, you'll be famous. You'll have all the girlfriends. And he said, what causes that? And I said, Pete, the biggest explanation I can give you what causes it. The first Webster Dictionary printed was in 1806. In that dictionary, under the word success, it described it as fortunate, happy, kind, and prosperous. Now that rolled off my tongue pretty easy. Fortunate, happy, kind, and prosperous. That's what was in the dictionary. Now, whatever year that was, and it's the same now in 2021, if you pick up the dictionary and look under success, it'll describe success as attainment of wealth, fame, rank, and power. We've lost our moral compass, and that's why we're having all the problems we're having.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. What are the lessons that you got from your mom? I know I got goosebumps from the story, but you're a Hall of Fame coach and speaker and mentor. How do you go on the lessons your mom taught you in terms of all done without her mouth, her actions? Taking the money back, 40 cents to the Red Owl, 25 cents to the Big New Eight. Never, ever talking about the man that left her. Never smoked, never drank, never dated anybody, never complained, never felt sorry for herself. An older woman that had to become a domestic and to go ahead and babysit for 50 cents an hour and live on a monthly check of $42.50. So maybe she won't ever be on the cover of Sports Illustrated or any famous magazine or newspaper, but boy, she's in God's Hall of Fame. And she didn't do it by her talking, she did it by her actions. So I learned from her. Any goodness I have in me, I have to credit it to two people, two of my mentors, my mother and John Wood. This stuff is all of incredible importance to me. Where do you think your mom got her character? Martin girl from North Dakota. She grew up in 1935 when I was born, She was 40-some years old. I had two older sisters that were 12 and 11 years old when I was born. So just her farm background and being from North Dakota, the ethics she learned. I always believe that character is your most valuable asset and that it needs to be protected and cherished and never abandoned because I don't think you can get it back. Well, just what you said. The old poem, The Man in the Mirror. When you get what you want and struggle for self, and the world thinks you're king for a day, just go to the mirror, look at yourself, and see what that person has to say. It isn't your mother, father, sweetheart, or boss who's judgment upon you must pass. The person who counts most in your life is the one staring back in the glass. Oh yeah, you may get pats on the back in your past, but your final reward will be heartache and tears if you cheated the man in the glass. I went to Calcutta to meet Mother Teresa. After there a couple days, I said to a couple of people with me, this woman's either crazy or she's a saint. Well, before I left Calcutta, I found out she was a saint. Yeah. Why did you go? Heard so much about her, and I've traveled in 90 countries. Always had urge to learn. As a young kid, we didn't have a car. We didn't go any place. We had no vacations. Stuck in a one-room apartment, go sitting on the fire escape at night. I used to travel. I used to dream sitting there about traveling, and North Dakota's as flat as the top desktop, and I used to dream about what I like to climb mountains. As a result, that came to fruition. I climbed the Matterhorn. So the French call it l'idée fixée. Whatever you fix in your mind will happen if you work on it, not wishing it. Everybody wishes they were a better person. Everybody wishes they were well. Everybody wishes they were more talented. Wishing is a bunch of baloney. You've got to will it. And you don't have to sell your soul to do it.
Hey, Coach, so obviously I know a lot about you, and, you inspire the heck out of me. I'm a passionate guy, and you're 10 times as passionate I am. But so, as a little kid, for me, I was small and I was insecure, and what gave me confidence was basketball and baseball. And I know that you were kind of insecure when you were young, but your whole life, it seems like you've been so passionate and fought for other people. And I'm just curious to wonder, when you kind of found your confidence in who you were, was it easier to fight for yourself or fight for others?
Excellent question. I don't believe anybody's ever asked that to me. Let me tell you how it happened. I came home from my bowl of soup. Didn't have money, hot lunch program or anything, and run back to school quickly. There was a welfare worker, and my mother was sitting in a chair, and I could tell as I was eating this soup, this woman was intimidating her, saying, Ward County Welfare gives you $42.50 a month, and can't he work? She pointed to me like a little dog, and she said, "Go get your purse," she said. "What are you doing with this $42?" My mother's almost crying, and I remember she was going through my mother's purse and meeting her, and I remember sitting there thinking to myself, never again will I ever see anybody intimidated or see an injustice that I won't stand up. And eating that soup, I remember the anger I had. Shortly after that, months after that, I never owned a basketball, didn't have the money to get it. I'd take mittens and put tape on them and form and shoot the hot water pipes out the hallway of this apartment house. Now, you guys are probably too young to know what linoleum is, but there was linoleum in the hall. I came home one day after school, and my mother was all upset. She said, "Dale, the landlady came down here, and she said, that brat of yours, he's out in the hall, and he's scuffing up the linoleum. And if he keeps on doing that, you're going to get kicked out of this apartment, and you're going to have to move." And my mother was just very nervous, and she said, "Dale," she said, "what will we do?" I took off down the hall, 4 security blind. I remember knocking on her door. She opened up her little peephole, and I said, "You leave my mother alone. You understand that? Don't you ever treat her like that." Then I went down the hall, the entire length of the hall, scuffing the linoleum with my heels as much as I could to defy what she was doing to my mother. So I think when I saw injustice, it was 10 years of age when I really saw it. The welfare worker and the landlady. And by the way, the landlady and her husband became very good friends of mine after that. They'd take me riding, they'd take me down to the train depot to watch the Great Northern Railroad come in, which was a big deal in a little town in Maya, North Dakota. They treated me with dignity. So,
Wow.
I think that's where that's got to be where I got it.
Well, it's definitely
And there's just something inside of me. If I see an injustice, my dear friend Harry Edwards, he's one of the great civil rights icons still living. He said, "Silence is evil's greatest ally." Yeah, you say nothing, you're complicit. That's right.
Well, I love that, Coach, because that, I see it all the time over here, and where I came from is that a lot of people can't speak for themselves, and they just take the abuse, and very few people really, stand up for them. So that's why I think interviewing you and some others the message is just so strong, and I just hope that people can hear it and get inspired to do the same thing, because, man, as you can see now, this world is jacked up, and people need support, and people fighting for them.
That's correct.
Thanks for that story. That's powerful.
It's about respect and it's about empathy. Well, we're thick-headed, I guess, and our situation presently in our country, we've allowed this because we send people to Washington, D.C. and don't demand anything. When you take on an establishment, years ago, I saw what the NCA, what they created, what they did. I spoke out against them heavily, and very few people did because they were intimidated by the NCA. The NCA, to me, those letters NCA, does not stand for National Collegiate Athletic Association. It stands for not caring about athletes. They have a market that they have. It's Frank DeFord, the old Sports Illustrated writer, said the largest legal cartel in the world is the NCAA. And so when I stood up to talk and call them what they actually were, etc., all of a sudden they decided my friend Harry Edwards said, silence is the eagle's greatest ally. Well, you certainly withstood. I think that was a real injustice to you, and we see it a lot. One of my greatest negative beliefs is that misery loves company. Boy, that's true. And I think it's killing us. There are a lot of people who prey on the miserable. The only thing that they make them feel better is to see other people miserable. Boy, that's valid. And I think that's what Greg and I are trying to do, and that's why we're tapping you, because you have an ability to bring about some cultural changes that, you know, most people just don't have. And you've lived by example, and that's what it takes. It takes people to show them, not tell them. So I really respect the way you've lived your life. Incidentally, there are a couple of specific questions I had that just interested me. One is your involvement with Native Americans. How did that come about? Grew up in Indian country, North Dakota, the Lakotas. I saw the injustices they were given. I'm glad you brought that up. We have had, just an example, the mistreated, the most neglected, the most overlooked group of all is Native American Indians. We took their land from them. We passed bills. We did everything to destroy them. We killed their leaders. We've had 370 treaties, the federal government of this country, with the Native Americans. And they have a perfect record of breaking those treaties that were made in some form. And yet we don't talk about it. So when you see, go back to Native America, go back to where Billy Mills was growing up in Pine Ridge, go back to North Dakota where I grew up and see how they live and what we've done to them. It's just tragic. You can't. And what happens is we remain silent about it. We don't complain enough about it. And as a result, it goes on and on and on and on. It just makes me sick, the Native Americans, along with the struggles they've gone through and what we've done to them. But when you think 370 treaties, we broke every one of them. I think also, maybe before we all should die, when Coach Wooden told me about Edgar Guest, I love to read, and Edgar Guest wrote a piece that really and truly, I think all of us, before we leave this earth, should probably have up on the mirror all the time. He said, quote, I have to live with myself, and I want to be fit for myself to know. I want to be able to, as the days go by, always to look myself straight in the eye. I don't want to stand with the setting sun and hate myself for the things I've done. I want to be able to go out with my head erect. I want to be able to deserve all people's respect. For here in the struggle for fame and self, I want to be able to like myself. I don't want to look at myself and know that I'm a cluster and an empty show. I know what others may never know. I see what others may never see. So I want to be self-respecting and conscience-free. How many of us can do that? How many people? See, everybody can complain, but who's going to do something about it? The present situation in Washington, D.C., I went back twice, seriously debating running for Senate. I thought there's no possible way I'm going to run for Senate. The situation we have going back there. Again, just being silent to things. Go back to Auschwitz. My wife and I visited Auschwitz one summer, and as we were going through the museum, I couldn't take it anymore. I'll meet you outside. Dale, you're so impatient. I'll meet you outside. I had all anger. I was crying. I had frustration. I went out and I walked down this little gravel road, leaning up, nice summer day, leaning my hand up against a pole, which later on I found was a railroad tie that they brought the people in the boxcars in. And I felt something on there. I was saying to myself, how could this happen? And on that little plaque, it said, the road to Auschwitz was built by hatred, but it was paved with indifference and apathy. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens. We just don't speak up. There's a lot of good people in the world, but they remain silent. Albert Einstein, considered by many people maybe the most intellectual man that ever lived, said it isn't the evil people that I worry about. It's all the good people that do nothing about the evil people. Yeah. I don't know how you address it. You know, it seems like the evil getting stronger and the good doing is getting less respect and less regard in the public domain. So that's why I think it's so important to self-deceit. You just look at the gun violence in our country. I mean, you go on in. I've been in 90 countries in the world, and I know the United States, there's nothing to compare. But we are losing our image. We are losing what we made this country great, and not complaining enough, not demanding enough. How do you think we change it? I think just by what I said, verbalizing it, contacting people. The easiest way out. What can little old me do? I'll tell you what little old you can do. Whoever's listening to this program. Years ago, this century, there's a little monk in a cloistered monastery outside the city of Rome. His name was Telemachus. Telemachus. He was out walking this one spring or summer day, and he saw a bunch of people heading down the road, crowded. What's this? So he followed them, and he'd never been into Rome. He lived on the outskirts, but he was in this cloistered monastery. He followed them to the Roman Colosseum. He didn't even have any idea it was there. Way up on top, he thought it was a sporting event or something. He saw these two gladiators come out and battle each other, and one killed the other guy, and they praise him. And he stands up, and please, in the name of God, stop this. Sit down, you idiot. Ran down to the restraining order. Stood up on that. Two more gladiators come out. He pleaded for him again. Please, in the name of God. Now the crowd, get that idiot out. He runs out and kneels down between the two in the middle of the stadium. They're ready now to go on their battle. He says, please, on his knees, please, in the name of God, stop this. The gladiator looked up, and of course, Caesar gives the thumbs down, get rid of the guy. They slash his stomach open. He falls on that ground, bleeds to death in the middle of that Colosseum. Now, if the story ended there, you could say, yeah, that's what happens. Open your mouth, you get knocked down. All of a sudden, a silence took over in that stadium. It became eerie. People started to leave the stadium. 15 days later, Caesar signed a decree. There would be no more gladiator fights in the stadium in Rome. One guy, Telemachus. So I don't want to hear that. What can little old me do? What can little old you can do? Whatever you want to do. Be encouraged. Because we're talking about this. Charles Krauthammer is now passed away. One of the famous journalists I thought of all time. You ask, what can we do? He said, quote, you're betraying your whole life if you don't say what you think. And boy, is that the truth. And Martin Luther King said something similar. You're not only responsible for what you say, but for what you do not say. So it takes effort. There's no question about it to speak up. Because when you speak up, they're going to have people that want to silence you. However, Leonardo da Vinci was considered by many the most brilliant man that ever walked or lived on this earth. He said, those who do not speak out against evil commanded to be done. Those who do not speak out against evil commanded to be done. And the biggest cop out, well, what can I do? Or what can I do? Think of Telemachus. Think of what Charles Krauthammer said. Think of what Martin Luther King said. Winston Churchill, why do you really like? He said, courage is the first of human qualities, because it's the quality that guarantees all the others. So if you don't have courage to speak up, then things are going to get worse and worse and worse. How do you instill resilience? Well, there's no pill, prayer, or prescription. And I think what you have to understand, adversity is only going to visit the strong, but it stays forever with the weak. And the only thing more powerful than fear is the boldness of faith. So if you haven't got faith, then all of a sudden we're taking God out of the school. We can't have the Ten Commandments, so we can't do this. We're becoming a godless country. Even the oath of office and everything, we're eliminating that. So I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about spirituality. Yeah. 2 and 2 is 4. It'll never be 3. It can't be 5. It sure as hell ain't going to be 6. It's 4. That ain't the way it's worked now. Everybody's trying to make 2 and 2 something else. So when you take God out of the equation, the problems are fairly simple. And I don't think I'm religious. I hope I'm spiritual. Without that, I mean, you can't live a proper life without faith. Yeah. So do you believe, Coach, that everything happens for a reason? Well, sometimes you wonder. I think one without faith, no explanation is possible. So if you don't have faith, as bad as things may be, yeah, I've seen some people, I tell you, I've helped people that were crippled, were born with deficiencies, couldn't walk, and they had more strength. I'll give you an example. There was a young boy that was blind, and he got around with a cane. He was so positive. Alan Levine was his name. He's now passed. He come to practice and everything, and I'd take him with me. I went to give a speech about 30 minutes from Baton Rouge, and we're driving back to Baton Rouge, which is less than a half an hour. And I said, Alan, you ever driven a car? No, I haven't driven a car. And I said, would you like to drive a car? Yeah. I pulled over. Before I pulled over, I let him hear the taps in the middle of the road. If you're getting too far out, you hear click, 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 click. You can hear the gravel on the side. So I said, okay, you're going to drive. He drove 10 miles, which is the little information I gave. Well, that led into something even more. I got a call, and he wanted to know what I was going to do this weekend. And I said, why you ask that? He said, well, I'd like you to meet me in this little town. He said, at the gas station. I got a surprise for you. I said, okay. So I drove up to this gas station. Here he was sitting in a pickup with a guy. And he said, follow us, coach. So we drove out in the middle of a sugarcane field, and here's a little airplane, little prop airplane, sitting out in that field. And he got out of the car and he says, coach, he said, I'm doing this, he said, in honor of you. He said, I'm going to become the youngest blind skydiver of all time. And I'd like you to go up in the plane with me. And I said, what? So we go up in this airplane, rickety old airplane, and he's standing on this little tiny step. And all they had on the ground was a big old circle with an X in the middle of it. And he had headset on. He stands out and goodbye, coach. And he jumped off and I thought, wow. He landed exactly where he's supposed to land. And he can't see at all. So now he did something even greater than that. He told me, he said, I remember your speech. Are you talking about heat fix and whatever you think in your mind? And he said, I learned something. I learned about the bats. He said they can send out ultrasound. So he said, what I started doing, he'd do this with it. He said, well, I found out I had my mother hold up glass, cardboard, paper, cloth, and I could tell, like a bat can send out ultrasound. He said, I could tell what it was. And so now he came down the hall the first time he came to the office. And the reason he did it, the woman told him, it's a fifth door on the left and it's a wood door. Now, if the door had been open, he probably would have gone by it, but it wasn't open. So people can do unbelievable things, but you can't do it without faith.
Hmm.
And you probably can't do it without someone to give you a leg up, as you did for him. Yeah, we all need a mentor sometimes. There's no question about that. Yeah, I think that's important. Greg talks a lot about ripples, that your actions send out ripples that have effect, and I think you're living proof of that. And I think we all want to be living proof of that. Well, last year, to show you the despair in the world, last year, 1 million people in the world committed suicide. 1 million, which is despair at its greatest. And when you do talk positive, you do have optimism. They either call you Pollyanna, well, what are you, man? Are you nuts? It's almost like to be negative has been, to be negative and talk and complain instead of doing anything about it or being positive. It's not no longer fashionable. Yeah, it's viewed as weakness. If you care, it's viewed as weakness. Yeah. But it's really just the opposite.
I mean, it's very easy to be a follower. And, with all this social media and media attention, people just want attention. So it's easier to get it through negative stuff than positive stuff. And it takes strength to stand up for it. And basically, people just don't have it. And it's not being passed along by, teachers and these politicians, but they're seeing it all day long and taking the intellectual knowledge in their brain and screwing them up. But it's too easy to just be negative. And it's impacting a lot of people in the wrong way.
Well, we're all going to face adversity, and if we can learn really and truly Adversity only visits the strong, but stays forever with the weak. So it's our decision. When we have adversity, are we going to be strong or are we going to be weak? If we're weak, it'll be with us forever. Everybody's going to have adversity, heartache, divorce, alcoholism, drug addiction, whatever. Losing your job, being sick, losing a loved one. Everything is a choice. Yeah, that's true. The choice we make makes us. That's correct. And the one thing you can control is your attitude. And all these things sound cliche, but they're all real. It's kind of a nature-nurture thing again. I think you're a combination of nature and nurture. Your mom certainly had the strength of character to provide an example that you lived through that impacted your whole life. But you're a grown man now, and you've made decisions your whole life. So just what Coach Wooden said, Greg and Ron, I feel the same. I'm 85 years old. I'm still a work in progress. But the one thing I know, I will never give up trying to be better. And John Wooden told me an interesting story when he's getting ready to go to Purdue. His daddy walked him out to the bus, gave him a hug, and told him, Johnny, he said, now you're going up there with all them big boys playing ball and all that. He said, don't try to be better than anyone else. That'll drive you nuts. But son, never cease to be the best you can be, and you'll find peace. Pretty good knowledge. Well, gentlemen, I've got to run to a meeting. Coach, I can't thank you enough for your time. And Greg and Rob, it was a pleasure.
Thank you, Coach.
And I hope somebody got something out of it. You had some good questions, good probing questions.
Thank you. We got a lot out of it.
Thanks a lot for including me.
Thanks, Coach.
Have a great day.
Thank you so much for listening today. Greg and I hope you got a lot out of it as we did. And again, apologies for the audio deficiency, but hopefully you were able to gain inspiration and wisdom from Coach Brown. Many of the people we will be presenting are from very diverse backgrounds.
We have people who are in the education field. We have teachers, we have Hall of Fame musicians, Hall of Fame coaches, we have authors, we have people in the business field, CEOs.
We have people from pretty much all walks of life and professions, and a lot of them came from very difficult beginnings, as Coach Brown did, but have spent the rest of their adult lives giving back primarily to young people, teaching, coaching, and mentoring. To me, are all in the same boat. And I think they're absolutely essential for young people's development. As I think you'll see in these interviews, virtually everyone we speak with had somebody who said, you're good enough. You can be great. You got to work, but I believe in you. So anyway, thank you for joining us today. And please join us again next time on 3P Champions. See you, Greg.
See you, Rob.
Take care, everybody.